See, America purchasing power parity compared to all the currencies in the rest of the world. Since America coined the supply of gasoline with the petrodollar throughout the world, it forced all nations to buy oil and gas in American currency. So that gave America the hegemonic currency over the world, which gave America the highest purchasing power parity to any other currencies. So that's why we have a trade balance indifference that Trump doesn't understand. Trump wants to extort the European Union and our allies because he thinks we have a trading deficit. But that trading deficit comes because America's purchasing power parity is more powerful than the rest of the currencies of the world. So if you was to take Europe's GDP per European members, it don't equivalate to the entire GDP of the United States. Even if you take the whole economic systems of nations within the European Union combined, as far as the Eurozone currency, still doesn't have the purchasing power parity of the United States. So naturally, the rest of the world's countries and their currencies have inferior purchasing power compared to the American greenback. So intrinsically, these nations will have a trade imbalance with the United States. They will have a trade deficit with the United States. And so Trump doesn't recognize that it's not they're trying to cheat us by selling us less products and for us to outspend them. That's not their fault. It's because they can't compete with their currencies on an equal playing field as the well-reserved currency that depends on the petrodollar. So Trump doesn't recognize that, and he's full of gluttony, so he wants to extort them by tariffing their products into the United States, which is unfair to the United Nations, the European Union member states, because basically Trump is trying to extort them for tribute as form of tariffs being imposed on their imports into the United States. Unfairly, they're being tariffed with the Trump tariff wars, the European Union as well as the developing world. Because you got to understand that America controls the world system that's pegged to the world reserve status. That nation keeps stockpiles of American currency in their coffers. Sovereign nations abroad, they keep currencies of the United States as their reserves because they're dependent on gasoline and oil to run their energy sectors of their transportation systems of their vehicles within their prospective countries. So that's why America has a hegemonic currency over the world. And it gives America an advantageous advantage with their purchasing power parity of America's currency on the rest of inferior nations' currencies. And because they have to depend on having reserves for energy supplies to buy oil in the open markets, the global markets, with American currency. So that forces nations to have reserves, stockpiles of American currency in their banks, in their central banks. But like I said, when it comes to America's purchasing power, America can buy more commodity goods than any other currency on earth. America has a stronger purchasing power. So yes, every other nation on earth will have a trade deficit with America. So it's because of America's mighty purchasing power that excuse the background noise. That's my dog. He's being jittery. So excuse the background noise. Yes. So since America is a strong member of, and after World War II, America started the New World Order to be as a sole world superpower. America had a large influence in constructing the world economical system, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of Settlements, the SWIFT system, and it all gives America the advantageous stock positioning within Wall Street to control commerce of liquidity throughout the world, with keeping in mind America's purchasing power parity in the oil markets, which other countries are shackled to American currency if they want to buy oil and gas. And since every nation has energy needs for their transportation vehicles and their home energy heating, so America has a brutish, hegemonic world sole superpower status with a hegemonic currency of America. So for Trump to punish allied nations for tribute as forms of tariff by extorting their coffers for more money out of their allies, our allies importing their commodity goods into America, it's like it reminds me of a leprechaun trolling sovereign nations' coffers for tribute. It's basically like an extortion. And it is no fault of these nations' own as far as their economics when they have a trade deficit with America. They can't compete parity by parity when it comes to purchasing power. They can't compete equally with America. You got to understand, the European Union was recently united as an economical system, mainly during the 1990s. That's when they really started to form as an economical bloc, the European Union. But it's been in the making ever since the completion of World War II, as far as NATO, and then eventually the European Union formed. But America set it up because America was the unscathed nation as far as our infrastructure wasn't bombarded in the midst of World War II. We were unscathed in the mainland of North America and the United States. Our infrastructures were unscathed, except for the Pearl Harbor bombardment of Japan and with our Navy ships parked in Hawaii. America's mainland was unscathed. But it wasn't the same for the European Union. At the conclusion of World War II, Europe was in ruins. British, the United Kingdom, Britain was in rubbles when Hitler bombarded London with their air raids. France was also heavily destroyed. Germany was also heavily destroyed. And Russia had to fight Hitler, so they had economical and structural consequences of fighting Hitler. Italy was also bombarded. So Europe, the whole of Europe was in ruins. And America, when they created the atomic bomb, it became the undisputed superpower. And then Roosevelt pegged the currency to OPEC through the House of Salt. And ever since then, even to the present day, this system of gasoline dollars, American dollars, keeps the world shackled to American greenbacks as world reserves currency, because these nations depends on American currency to buy energy, to feed their country, to power their infrastructures as far as transportation vehicles throughout the nation's highways and roads. Every nation has cars. Every nation has a population that depend on their personal vehicles to get them back and forth. So all nations on earth are hooked to gasoline. And they keep American reserves to ensure that their population has a cushion for energy supplies into their countries but they have to do it with American petrodollars. So, of course, America has the world's most powerful purchasing currency, and America uses it to colonize the whole world economically and to control the stock markets of Wall Street and to control the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trading Organization, the Bank of Settlements, the SWIFT system. So America uses it as a tool to basically colonize the whole world as their economical colony when it comes to the financial world order of this hegemonic greenback. So basically the whole world is America's oyster of colonies. You know, the whole world is basically pegged to America's currency. They shackled. They have no choice but to be shackled to America's currency. So is it kind of like a gluttony of America's greed over the world stage when it comes to commerce? So every nation on earth, yes, would intrinsically have a trade deficit with America because they can't compete equally with their currency as far as combining competing their currency with the American currency head to head. Every nation's currency, including the Eurozone currency, is inferior when it comes to purchasing power of America because they don't have the advantageous positioning of controlling the world energy supplies with their currency. So even the European... Give me a second. My dog is making too much noise. Give me a second. Shh. Sit down. Sit. So at the end of the day, give me 1 second. So at the end of the day, every currency, including the Eurozone currency, is inferior to go head to head with American greenbacks. So Trump doesn't realize, or he does, but he doesn't give a damn. He just likes to extort because it makes him look like he's the most powerful man on earth. It makes him look like he feels like he's a robber baron on the world stage. It's America first, and the rest of the world has to pay tribute to America. So he wants to strong arm the world into extorting tributes off our allies in the form of trade deficit tariffs. But it's gluttony in my point of view. It's pure gluttony of the mega movement, especially the architect of it, the founder, which is Trump. It's an extortion racket for him because he thinks that that's the only way America can get rich again is by extorting our allies to make up for America's deficit of $35 trillion because America has so much of a purchasing power. And because every time a nation holds American currency in reserves in their central banks, when foreign nations hold American currency as reserves in their central banks, that causes, even though America has a purchasing power, when the currency of other nations are being traded with American dollars, that causes high interest rates. And so America bears the brunt of having the world's most purchasing power, but at the same time having the most interest rates for borrowing. So when America's Treasury Department are trying to sell our currency to foreign nations as IOUs, treasury bills, and security bonds, it comes at a premium equal to the purchasing power of our currency. So America, when we borrow abroad from the Eurozone, when they buy security bonds and security instruments through the Treasury Department of America, now America has to compensate from borrowing from them with high interest rates. And so America has going on 36 or 37 trillion dollars, but it's around 35, 36, probably going on to 37 trillion dollars. That's just our national debt. That's not our foreign obligations abroad. It's way more higher. It's like 100 trillion some odd dollars with our foreign pledged obligations with nations abroad. But domestically, America, within our domestic economy, America has 35 trillion and growing of national debt. And so the Treasury Department and the IRS doesn't know how to tax our American citizens in order to compensate and pay this debt off. We don't know how to tax our way out of it because it's impossible. You can't create jobs, enough paying jobs in the United States, and it's impossible to create so much tax derivatives to pay the national debt off. So we keep on raising the debt ceiling. We keep on raising the debt ceiling. But at the same time, we keep on extorting the rest of the world with the petrodollar. And now Trump is tariffing them to make up for the shortfall of the Treasury Department to pay for our national deficit of $35 trillion. So we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. And we're trying to extort the world to make up for our shortfalls in order to pay our federal deficit. But then we keep on raising the debt ceiling with the Treasury Department, and we're trying to dollarize South America as a bunch of banana republics, if you will. We're trying to make them as will manifest destiny to be beckoning by Federal Reserve oligarchs to control the money supplies of South American countries with our greenbacks, to make them as like a colony of plantations of Southern America states within South America to be supplied with the Federal Reserve currency, like Chile under Milei, Argentina under Milei. We got, I think, Salvador, Ecuador, Panama, some of these nations already been dollarized. Now we're moving on to Argentina. We made their country have runaway inflation by depressing their currency, devaluating their purchasing power, and then calling in the debt, the Federal Reserve, that gave Argentina runaway inflation in the hopes that they get desperate and dollarize, and then the Federal Reserve can move in and nationalize with American companies all of their industries, with the flow of their country being replacing the Argentina currency with the greenback. So America's trying to colonize the whole of South America with our currency, with manifest destiny. As far as Washington foreign policies are concerned in South America. But you start to see how American gluttony starts to extort the world. And then we complain because we don't know how to pay the national debt off. And we're so scared that the foreign nations with their American reserves would dump our currency, thereby giving us runaway inflation, hyperinflation, and we would experience a depression bigger than the first depression when it comes to our economy. But America and Washington is so scared bipartisanly because they don't know with the IRS it's impossible to pay off the deficit of $35 trillion and still maintains social programs. You will have to cut out all of wealth, all of Medicare, all of Social Security, all of the state's budgets in order to pay these $35 trillion and growing. By this time, it should be like 36, probably going to 37. But and that's not comparing what we pledged abroad to foreign nations as far as with our currency. We have almost 100 and some odd trillion dollars pledged around the world. So for America won't renege on their currency, now you got Trump extorting the world for tribute in order for America to get their selfish ways when it comes to economics, foreign affairs. So it's like we're trying to have a cake and eat it too. And it's like a Ponzi scheme that America keeps on feeding itself in order to prop up its pyramid scheme as a hegemonic currency of the all-seeing eye, if you will, of the mighty dollar. So at the end of the day, it doesn't make Trump is appalling with his gluttony towards tariffing Europe. At the end of the day, Europe, the Eurozone, is what possible. It makes it possible to float America economy. If it wasn't for the Eurozone or NATO, America will be stuck on stupid and be a dwarf of a superpower. If it wasn't for the European Union floating the greenback when it comes to the Eurozone supporting America's economy. Or if it wasn't for NATO backing up America, America will be a land of cowards when it comes to flexing their muscles abroad. But you have leaders like Trump that doesn't recognize what Europe has done for America. All Trump is a shameless, greedy bastard. That all he cares is about his selfish vanity and how he can make America great again and make it rich again by extorting our allies for tribute, by trolling their sovereign coffers, by extorting them economically to pay tribute in forms of tariffs. So at the end of the day, America suffers from a megalomaniac gluttony of greed when it comes to our economic system. And it's self-serving, it's selfishness on America's part through the Treasury Department and America's politicians when it comes to foreign economics, global economics. It's self-serving for America's gluttony. It's like a Ponzi scheme of the almighty dollar CNI of the Treasury Department. When we sell IOUs, as far as security bonds and treasury bills, for our nations abroad can buy into our federal deficits. So it's like a vicious cycle that America keeps on feeding itself and growing stronger and stronger economically as a hegemonic currency over the world, while the rest of the world is pegged by being cuffed to this currency of America, shackled to the currency of America. And Washington uses it as a weapon to control foreign affairs, to prop up our military. And is an asymmetric superpower. It's America at the top and everybody is beneath us. And America feeds off of everything, like a parasite leeching off of of its host. We like a slug. We suck everybody dry in the systems that we have created ever since the conclusion of World War II, when it comes to economics and diplomacy and foreign affairs. So America uses our currency to enslave the rest of the world to the greed of Washington and our politicians through the Treasury Department, through the stock exchange of Wall Street, through the oligarch Federal Reserve private bankers. America became the global capitalist world order of free commerce in America's security exchange, Wall Street's interests. Capitalism when it's controlled by America globally. So at the end of the day, to have a president like Trump think that he can extort our allies and keep on bleeding them dry because we want to keep on feasting off of gluttony with our purchasing power parity is appalling. The European Union shouldn't stand for it. They should have the right to make decisions free from the American greenback. They should have the right to control their union currency and how they feel fit without the President of America extorting them for tributes by inflicting tariff on their imports into America. We shouldn't have to have a president that the only way he can make America great again is by stealing it, the wealth of nations, with a theory of unmorality. In bad faith, should we tender the money under the Trump movement as a medium of exchange? That's what Trump stands for with his tariff wars. And he should be vanquished. The greenback should be dumped, not only by the emerging third world nations of South America, Africa, the whole of Asia, the whole of the Middle East, Eastern Europe. They should, and including the European Union, they should have a multipolar system that can represent their regions without America's enslavement of world economics, world order. America shouldn't have the right to shackle and imprison every other nation's economy. under our hegemonic petrodollar currency that makes it possible for America to make the world dependent and shackled and handcuffed to our currency. And then to have a president to extort the rest of the world, including our assessing on our allies to cough, excuse me, to troll their sovereign coffers for tribute. And that's the only way he can make America rich again is by extorting our allies with protection rackets. Like if he was some type of mobster throwing rocks in through windows of merchant shops and saying, hey, if you want protection, you could pay us. And he's the one that's throwing rocks as a mobster to shatter windows and then to tell the merchants, hey, we don't know who threw the rock, but if you want us to protect your business, you could pay us every week for protection. That's what he's doing to the Eurozone economy. He's tossing rocks. I would invite Russia to have at y'all if y'all don't pay up. He's tossing rocks into the Eurozone windows of the Eurozone merchant economy, breaking their windows, and then he steps in as the world's sole superpower and say, hey, if you want us to protect y'all gotta pay up. It's no different from a mobster sending in a thug to break a merchant window, and then the mobster steps in like a knight in shining armor and steps in and talks to the merchant owner of the shop and say, hey, if you don't want your windows to be broken, if you don't want to be terrorized by these thugs, you could pay us a protection fee every week, and we would ensure that your business doesn't get extorted. If you pay us, we'll protect you. But it was that same mobster that caused a thug and ordered the thug to throw a rock into the window in order to extort the merchant as a thug, like an Italian mobster extorting the merchants in their neighborhoods for protection rackets. That's what Trump is doing to the European Union. Hey, if y'all don't pay up, I would encourage Russia to attack y'all. Pay up, pay up. And that's the only way he can think that America can become great again is by stealing money from our allies' sovereign coffers of their central banks, which is appalling. Is the most narcissistic case of gluttony in world economic history. America suffers from it under the Trump mega madness of a movement. Because we don't know how to derive taxes, federal and state taxes as citizens. The IRS doesn't have the ability to tax his way out of it. $35 trillion of debt. The IRS doesn't have enough derivatives, and it's impossible to tax everybody and rob every hardworking American check. They will have to tax us 100%, and we will have to come home empty-handed in order for them to pay off the $35 trillion of debt. So it's impossible for the IRS to tax their way out of it, the federal deficit. It's impossible. Every state will have to cut their budgets, and they will have to tax every citizen 100% of their gross earnings in order to pay that $35 trillion of debt. Because it's mathematically impossible to tax our way out of it. So we keep on raising the federal debt ceiling. Congress every so often argues about not shutting down the government. So the only way Trump can think of making America great again is to steal and extort our allies in order to pay our gluttony greed of our hegemonic currency, as far as when we sell treasury bills and security bonds for other nations to lend us money with interest. In order to keep on feeding our greed, we got to extort those same allies and steal their derivatives in forms of tariffs. So even the European Union needs to decouple from America's greenback as America's hegemonic currency over the world. Even the Eurozone has to have sovereign independence from the greenback. Not to mention South America, Africa, the whole of Africa, the whole of Asia, the whole of the Middle East, the Arab lands, the whole of Eastern Europe. It has to be a multipolar banking system to represent these regions, to rise up the developing world into an multipolar economic world order. And the world needs to decouple from the tyranny of America's gluttony over the world stage when it comes to our common hegemonic currency over the world. It's not fair to the European Union. It's not fair to the entire South America. It's not fair to the entire Africa. It's not fair to the entire Eastern Europe. It's not fair to the entire Middle East. It's not fair to the entire Asia region. It's not fair for America to enslave the whole world for our gluttony of greed when it comes to world commerce, using our economic currency as leverage to extort the world for America's consumption benefits. It's not fair. It doesn't stand up to the theory of morality when you tender currency in bad faith, as Trump has done with his terrorforce. You should have a medium of exchange of value when there's bad faith behind that tendered currency. So one of my global reformations of the global economic system as an economic theologian, one of my thesis of economic theory of evolution of the global market exchange of currency parity of sovereign nations currency exchange with their in regards to their trading of commodity goods, imports and exports globally. I believe that every nation should have equal purchasing power when it comes to their currency. So every nation on earth currencies are equally have the same equal purchasing power globally. So, because right now America, with the G7, controls the world economic system, and they devaluate third world nations to be inferior purchasing power. Take like Argentina, for example, that America with the Federal Reserve are crippling their currency by devaluing it, giving it runaway inflation in order to move in the Federal Reserve oligarchs to federalize every Argentinian company under the American currency, to create it and bring it in as the new colony to join Paraguay, Ecuador, and Panama as far as being dollarized. So at the end of the day, America uses the third world economies to be inferior, devaluated. The currency of African nations, the currency of Latin American nations, the currency of Arab nations, the currency of Asian nations. America, with the G7, devaluates their currency to be inferior when it comes to purchasing power, and it keeps them stuck as third world nations, and it doesn't afford them the equal purchasing power to develop their nations away from poverty, to rise their nations away from poverty. So it keeps the third world in perpetual poverty by America with the hegemonic currency making the rest of the world currencies inferior when it comes to purchasing powers. And between the IMF, the World Bank, the Bank of Settlements, the Central World Bank, the Swift system, Moody's, what it does, it gives America and the G7 the ability to make every third world nation's currency have runaway devaluated inflation. So it cripples nations' economies when they devaluate their currencies to be inferior. That you have to pay to buy a loaf of bread, you have to pay like $1,000 or $3,000. It depends. Like, look at I believe it was the Zimbabwean. Excuse me. I got my throat is burning. Acid reflex. Give me a second. The Zimbabwe dollar. They even printed up a $1 trillion note because America likes to make Africa inferior with their currencies to suck them dry from their natural resources, their resources of their African states within Africa, the continent of Africa. So look at Venezuela because of the tariffs, the sanctions. Venezuela is being crippled. Look at Cuba, genocidally being starved, deprived of imports of food. So they're being genocidally starved by the embargo. To collapse the Communist Party, America is using their economic world hegemony to starve Cuba. And the United Nations, every nation on earth said that the embargo on Cuba should end. They voted. Every nation on earth voted to liberate Cuba from the embargo economically. Every nation on earth, you could say, the European Union, Asia, Africa, South America, Canada, Mexico, every nation on earth voted for America to end the embargo, genocide, starvation of Cuba. Every nation within the United Nations voted to liberate Cuba from the embargo that's being used as an economical genocide tool of America starving out Cuba. The only nation that voted to keep the embargoes going was America. Veto power as permanent members in the United Nations Security Council. But every nation on earth voted for Cuba to finally get the chance to feed their populations. Because America is starving them to death with embargoes. So that goes to show you the power of America when America can defy the whole world economically with their weapon of control of the world commerce. When every nation on earth is saying, America, ease off of Cuba, liberate them from the embargo, and America thumbs their middle finger up at the whole world and says, nah, we want to keep them starved. And America takes the unilateral sole position to tell the world, F off. We're going to starve them with our embargoes. And the whole world is telling America it's unfair for you to do that to Cuba. To starve them with your embargoes is unfair. The whole world voted to liberate Cuba from genocidally oppressed, starvation, economic militant weapons by America using the economic system to starve Cuba into submission. That goes to show you the tyranny of America when they can flaunt their middle fingers at the rest of the world and say, we don't care what y'all think, we still gonna starve Cuba with our embargo. And that's just a microcosm of America's gluttony when it comes to shackling the whole world to America's petrodollar and controlling the world commerce system. So at the end of the day, I want to ratify the world economy away from this putrid of the gluttony of greed of America's capitalism. I want to free up every nation's economy to be equal playing field when it comes to world commerce. So one of my initiatives is to make every currency of every nation have equal purchasing power with every other nation on earth. And for no nation to have the ability to inflict tariffs on nations' commerce or to impose sanctions, economical sanctions. So I want to make it possible to outlaw economical sanctions or tariffs, and I want to on any nation. No nation should be able to starve a nation's population in the forms of embargoes or sanctions, economical sanctions. No nation should have the economical power to starve a nation's population of innocent civilians or citizens by starving their populations with economical sanctions or embargoes or unfair forms of extortion in the forms of tariffs. So I want to outlaw it globally in world commerce that no nation or no organization should have the power to starve a nation's population in forms of embargoes, tariffs, or sanctions. So every nation should be sovereignly protected within their populations to not be imposed upon with starvation tactics of embargoes, sanctions, or tariffs on a nation, because it's unfair for politicians to starve nations' populations into submission, to cripple a nation's economies, and for the whole populations to suffer from famish, of hunger and oppression. Why should a nation population suffer because a politician of another nation wants to starve that nation to death or to cripple a nation population in the hopes that they will overthrow their governments? Like the United States uses economics and the CIA to overthrow governments by giving a nation inferior economies in the hopes that there will be social unrest and rebellions, using CIA tactics to prop up puppet leaders in the third world, using commerce as a weapon with embargoes and sanctions and tariffs. And who suffers are not the politicians, but their nation populations of innocent human beings. No matter what nation suffers from embargoes and sanctions or tariffs, the ones who suffer is the population. It's not the politicians in charge. It's the population of citizens that have nothing to do with politicians' egotisms or personal prejudice of individual beliefs as human beings calling the shots for nations' populations as leaders. It's the population that just wants to survive in peace, that bears the brunt of tyrant leaders imposing another nation to be crippled economically, and the populations to be tossed into obscurity of pure impoverished starvation, for their nations to be crippled, infrastructures crumbling, and their populations to be starved to death. That shouldn't be allowed, because the one that suffers are innocent human beings throughout the world and their populations of their nations. So no country should have the right to sanction any other country, or embargo any other country, or tariff any other country. Every nation should be protected sovereignly from sanctions, tariffs, and embargoes in order to ensure humanity to live better off than to be genocidally starved into submission or converted into overthrowing governments like America uses. America devaluates the nation's currency, plummets them into hyperinflation, runaway inflation, in the hopes that their nation populations with the CIA can prop up puppet leaders, so America can overthrow third world nations and keep America's hegemony over the world. That shows the world that these type of strategies of a hegemonic currencies and how superpowers, the global sole superpower, that should show the world a lesson of gluttony. America should be able to, the world should learn from America's sufferment of gluttony, of greed mongering the world into submission. The rest of the world should learn the lesson and not repeat it when it comes to international sovereign nations abroad, globally. So at the end of the day, I want every nation to have their sovereign currencies have equal purchasing power with every other nation on earth when it comes to purchasing power parity of every nation's sovereign currencies. And I want to outlaw it and make it internationally illegal for any nation to have the ability to impose tariffs or sanctions or embargoes on any other nation on earth. So no nation should have the authority to impose tariffs, embargoes, or sanctions on any other nation. The populations of humanity should be protected from impoverishedness in the hands of tyrant economic nations. So I'm an economical theologian. I studied Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. I studied the Chicago Boys of Economics. And the theory of morality is my economical inferences or my theories of reformation of the world global economic system. Theory of morality that considers every nation equally, that considers every nation to have their equal place at the table of commerce, to make every nation self-sufficient, to raise nations from impoverished third worlds into first world nations through the global south of South America, the whole of Africa, the whole of Asia, the whole of the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and the European Union, as well as America. I'm coming up with reformation economical systems for America as far as how we deal with Social Security, healthcare, and commerce. So I'm reformatting the economical system and reforming it to deal with the economic systems of tomorrow, not only of America's domestic economic systems, but also sovereign global systems of sovereign nations' currencies and the markets of equal purchasing power parity with every nation's sovereign currencies having an equal place at the table of the wealth of nations globally, based on the theory of good faith tendered morality, to consider every nation's currency equally powerful to be equal when it comes to global commerce, for every nation to have an equal opportunity to develop their nations away from poverty or from economical oppressions inflicted by other nations using currency as a weapon. That shouldn't be allowed on the human population of this planet, to starve nations into submission using currency manipulations as a weapon to keep the third world beckoning and impoverished and subservient to superpowers. That's tyranny of gluttony, as far as I perceive it. So as far as theory of morality, of tendered good faith currencies, of global sovereign currencies, of nations throughout our united international communities, we shall all have equal place at the table with equal purchasing power parity of every nation's sovereign currencies. And every nation's population should be protected from their economies being starved to death by manipulations of economical superpowers, using currency exchange to devaluate nations' currencies and give them runaway inflations to impoverish their nations in order to capitalize and federalize their dependencies on super hegemonic currencies, as America does with their greenback world reserve status, hegemonic global currency. So at the end of the day, I don't believe any nation on earth should have the power to impose starvation on any other nation or impoverishedness on any other nation on earth. So I want to outlaw the ability, international law of commerce, to make it illegal and to impede any nation to have the authority to inflict any tariff, sanctions, or embargoes on any other nation. Every nation should be immune. Their population should be immune from impoverish or starvation in the forms of currency economical weapon strategies of world commerce, as America does to the rest of the world. So at the end of the day, I believe in a multipolar economical system. So let's say South America should have their economical union to take into account the needs of their populations in their regions. The same for the whole of Africa. They should have their economical central bank unions to help rise their region of the African continent to help rise themselves from poverty. The same for the Arab lands. They should have their own central block economic systems. The same for Asia. They should have their block economical systems. So South America should have their own block economical system of central banking. Africa should have their own central bank economical block system. The same for Asia, should have their own central bank block systems. East Europe should have their own block. The European Union has their union. America has their union currency. So at the end of the day, if country decides to use union currencies of their own or their own sovereign currencies, either way, their currency should have equal purchasing power, prospectively to their equal to any other nation's purchasing power, in order for their populations to flourish. Every nation's currency should have equal places at the table of commerce. So, this initiatives I want to propose to the United Nations Assembly. And I want to also phase out the permanent security members of the United Nations. I want to allow every nation on earth to have their permanent members as security members of the United Nations, to be permanent members of the Security Council. And at the end of the day, like I said, when it comes to world commerce, we should respect the wealth of nations. We should respect the theory of good faith of their population's moralities when we tender currency exchange. I learned a lot from Adam Smith. So at the end of the day, the theory of my morality, of my ratification and implementation of my economical theories will leave the world better off than worse off. So at the end of the day, these are the economical theologian positioning theories that I am implementing globally. And it's the best thing that I can do to safeguard humanity from impoverishment and starvation and crippling poverty. So at the end of the day, this theory of professorship of commerce, of me being a theologian of studying economics, is implementatively doable globally. It's basic ground rules that every nation and their population should have an equal place at the table of commerce when it comes to world economic order. And every nation should be able to feed their populations equally at that table of commerce. And that together as humanity, we will rise up with a good faith of tendered humankind when we depend on ourselves to take care of ourselves globally as one species living on this planet, the human species. We owe it to ourselves to hand in hand work with our societies globally, so we rise together as human beings and safeguard ourselves from oppressions of impoverishment. It's unfortunate that some politicians use commerce as weapons, and the ones that are to suffer is humankind when nations are plummeted into poverty and crippling hunger for their populations. That's inhumane. So that's why I came up with these theories and initiatives to phase it into the new global economic order of tomorrow.